Hi, welcome to Shakey's podcast. Thank you for joining. Something a little bit different today. Keep trying to do different topics, different subjects, and this podcast today is very current, very relevant for what's going on in the world today. I say hello and welcome to Esheru, political commentator, who's joined us today. Esheru, how are you, my friend?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you, Cassim. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I've been following your work for a while. Safe to say, I share a lot of the views that you have, I think we'll find out today if we're both quite like-minded. But before we get into talking about some of those subjects that we will cover today, I would like to know just a bit about you, Esheru. If you could give me a bit of background, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'll take you back to the beginning. My parents are Jamaican immigrants. They moved to Britain in the late 50s, early 60s. I was born and raised in a place called Handsworth in Birmingham, which some would have heard of because it's the home of the very late poet Benjamin Zephaniah, the home of Steel Pulse, which is also the favorite reggae band of the former President Bill Clinton. Left Birmingham, moved to London to study in the very, very early 90s. Wasn't there for very long. And then I left, went into Europe for a total of 22 years. Lived in Spain, Norway, Greece, and Sweden for most of my time, which is where I raised my son. Moved back to Britain in 2017 to be close to my parents and joined Twitter, I think it was 2021, purely to discuss Brexit because I needed an outlet to talk about what was happening in the country. And it was really from that point forward that I kind of got into this political commentating. But I've been politicized from a very early age, I must say.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Just a quick question. What made you do the Europe thing with you mentioned to bring up your son. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I think what it was, once I left university, got a good degree, started working for quite a large organization at the time, and I was in a retail management trainee program, and I went through to like deputy management structure within like just under a 2-year period. So I rose very quickly in the ranks, but then I thought, is this it? This can't be it. I really need to get out and see some of the world. And I just packed a bag one day and just went to Spain. And that was it. And the rest is history, as they say.
Brilliant. Love it. Love that. Love the background. Love the story. Today, there's a couple of subjects I want to discuss with you. I think any conversation right now needs to start in the place of the ongoing genocide that is taking place.
Right.
I'd like to touch a little bit on the current state in the United Kingdom itself, and I thought we could have a little chat as well. With my background, and I think you will have some experience and knowledge on institutional racism as well, which I thought we could touch on. But let's start with what's going on over in the Middle East at the moment and has been for the last 12 months, but not just the last 12 months. Many years before then as well. What's your take on everything that we've seen?
Well, I think anybody that follows me knows that I'm very vocal about the position that the West has taken. Once again, we're seeing a genocide unfold, and there are many people like us, decent people in societies, that are very upset about what we're watching. But I think what we're more upset about is the lack of inaction by the very powers that are supposed to stop this from happening. On top of that, it's the media, which is constantly gaslighting us, telling us stories of ceasefires and meetings to discuss a ceasefire or a meeting to stop weapons being sent. But then you turn around and realize, or you see that America sends another $8 billion in the US, and Britain is still sending, F-35s to on combat missions to Israel. So it's very, very sad, very shocking, very harrowing, but also it has actually revealed something that many of us who have been paying attention for some time, it's now revealed that, and a lot of other people are now seeing what we've been seeing for some time. When I say we, it isn't because we've got an all-seeing eye and we can see into the future, but ever since as far back as I can remember, when I've looked around the world, the only people that I've seen who have been under attack are people that resemble you and I, black and brown people, whether that's the continent of Africa, whether that's various parts of South America, or whether that's the Middle East. There are no white countries that have been under severe attack in the same way. So we live with this on a daily basis. Most people kind of see it for a short while, and then they get on with their lives. But we see all the problems that's unfolding in Congo. We see the problems unfolding in the DRC. We see the problems in Rwanda and all the other small bits that are happening. But people just pick up and move on, and they'll probably go and discuss the wedding of a royal or, this World Cup. But people are still dying because you're still paying attention. I mean, look at Israel, look at Palestine. This has been going on since 1948. The West loves to start a story somewhere in the middle instead of the beginning. So if you look at the Iranian Revolution, for example, 79, this is where that situation always starts. It never starts in 1953 with the overthrow of the democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, by Britain, the US, and the CIA to control Iranian oil. And it's a very similar thing with what's happening in Palestine right now. They want us to believe it started October the 7th. Israel has been relentlessly occupying and harming Gazans for decades.
You talked about the gaslighting of the Western media. It's got to that point now, though, Esheru, that do they think we are buttoned up the back? Like, the Israeli ambassador, for the UK, she's been making waves in news just now, and I actually heard her say on a clip on LBC that there's no proof to back up that we're targeting children, and I'm just like, is that are we seeing? I'm sure we're not watching a movie unfold over the last 12 months. This is real life, and it's clearly showing a lot of evidence of children being killed and slaughtered in this genocide. How can that continue to unfold like that?
Well, the thing is, they control the narrative. They control the mainstream media. Okay, I'll take you to Ukraine, for example. Whether you believe what Putin did or not is neither here nor there. But the first thing that they did was control all the news that was coming out of Ukraine. So they banned all Russian TV and radio here in the West. Russian bloggers were threatened with sanction or being arrested. People who had traveled to Ukraine to try to report suddenly found that they couldn't access their bank accounts in the countries of their birth. So the first thing they did was control the information flow. And as they say, whenever we have a war or conflict, the first casualty of that is the information, right? And this is what we're seeing in Palestine. If you look at the entire Western media narrative and discourse, it has been very pro-Israel, okay? You get little snippets here and there of Palestine, but it's mostly been pro-Israel. The only channel that seems to have spoken about this in its entirety from the very, very beginning, and from the most truthful aspect has been Al Jazeera. Okay, I've been following Al Jazeera for about 3 or 4 years, but not religiously. But I have been following it religiously over the last 12 months. But the style of reporting is very different. A few nights ago, I was fortunate enough to attend an event here in London, International Centre for Justice for Palestine, and the ICJP ran this event in conjunction with the film that was just released by Al Jazeera called Gaza on YouTube. If you guys haven't seen it, please do watch it. And there was a panel, and part of the panel were a doctor that works in Gaza, an Al Jazeera journalist, the filmmaker, a female Palestinian writer, and an American lady who handles arrest warrants at that level. And what was fascinating was to listen to, and I've been to a couple of these before, this isn't the first one. There's a very well-known journalist that asked me to attend. She knows who she is. I won't name her, but thank you very much for allowing me to follow you. And what's interesting is listening to these people talk about their experience in Gaza. And when you're hearing it from the horse's mouth, then you know that we're being lied to from the mainstream media. So if anybody doesn't want to believe what Al Jazeera is saying, find an event and listen to some of the people who have been on the ground, and you get a very different story to what the BBC, Channel 4, and all the other channels are telling you.
Yeah, I think that's been evidently clear. I also I've opted to follow Al Jazeera more for more accurate, unbiased viewpoints, and they really give you a clearer picture. Even the language used by BBC, it's always used in a certain way to deflect as much as possible of what is actually happening. You mentioned quite early on in this podcast that that we keep being gaslit by ceasefire. Now I think it's blatantly obvious now. Israel does not want a ceasefire. Like it's the attempts have clearly been there, and there's not a ceasefire in place. So what? How does this stop? It's either are the West going to act and stop it, or are we going to go into another world war, or World War III, or is now the sign of the countries like Spain, France, Italy starting to put pressure on the fact that we're not going to continue selling arms, going to inflict even more pressure on Keir Starmer, on Biden, for them to actually act on this?
Well, let's look at the makeup of the world. The US has been given, literally handed on a plate, the position to police the world. When the Iron Curtain fell back in the late 80s, 89, I think the wall came down, and America won the Cold War. They were given the crown to run the world, and people look up to them as the savior for some strange reason. I'm not sure why. If you look at the state of the US, I'm not sure why people seem to think that they can run the world. Anyway, putting that aside, I think that the US and Israel have an objective. What I like to call that area. It's the last colonial outpost. It's the last colonial outpost, okay, of the West. The US and Israel have an objective to expand in that region and develop a permanent base or permanent region. What we're seeing now is something that's been years in planning, okay, years in the making. And I don't believe that they're going to stop. I can see Ukraine stopping. I can see the Russians sitting down with the US and other arbitrators and discussing how they're going to carve up Ukraine to their benefit. But I don't see Israel stopping right about now. And even though Spain and Ireland and a few other countries decided not to send weapons, it just means more money for the weapons manufacturers that come out of the US. And let's remember the top 5 weapons manufacturers, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamic, BAE, these guys have been the top 5 since 2001 when they started compiling lists, and it just means more money for them. So I don't see ending just now. I see this thing expanding even further, unless we get reports of people being killed in the streets, just stood there doing nothing. Very much like the collateral damage video that Julian Assange went to prison for, or should I say arbitrarily detained for happening.
You talked about the fact that, it's predominantly people that look like you and I, whose countries are, since I've been alive, I witnessed Iraq when I was a child and what happened there. And the countries you mentioned there, the likes of Congo, Africa, has always had issues of being, oppressed, and South Africa, apartheid, all these. So clearly, to me, there is a racial element in all of that, to the point that, I not so long ago said I believe the Western leaders are racist in their views, and it got some backlash. But I think I don't see it any other way. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, people that follow my tweets will know that I speak a lot about white supremacy, okay? And what I see are acts of white supremacy It is the West. Now, this is a very clever tweet that I read a few days ago. When we say the West, what we should say is white, because the West actually means white. Because in the same way that Australia, so far away, is considered the West, in the same way that Colombia isn't considered the West or the Caribbean. Do you understand me? So it is white supremacy at play here. And if we want to take it down to another level, I think the white population, global population, they make up somewhere between 8 to 12% of the global population. There are varying degrees of brown people that would class themselves as white, but there are far more black and brown people on the planet. And if you look at just the way the resources are controlled, the 8 to 12% control something like 85% of the world's resources. They want to hang on to that. And they will continue using whatever economic policies or justification for that to happen. And it is about, for me, what I see, let me see, I think we have something like 118 million people who are currently displaced globally. Of the 118 million people who are displaced globally, I believe only 3 million of them are white, and those are Ukrainians. The rest are black and brown people. Is that by their own choice, or is that by design? It's a question you can ask yourself, but we know there are despotic leaders in various countries, dictators, but a lot of the countries that the West seem to have an issue with are countries that have either geographical locations that they're interested in to put military bases, or they have resources which they wish to control. And of course, I'm not going to say China are not also doing bad things, or Russia, they're also involved. But when you look at the state of the world, the majority of the world, it is coming from, Western countries, namely out of Washington and Whitehall first.
We've talked, a lot about the global situation right now, and it's tough to just talk about. I feel like now we're getting to that point where this is just becoming daily, and we are seeing mass murders and killings of women and children, innocent civilians daily. And my worry is, it's almost people are they becoming desensitized to it? Is it becoming like it's horrible to even say it. It's almost like it's the norm, and it's just day-to-day life, and it's not day-to-day life. It's not normal. It shouldn't be happening.
I think that we have become desensitized a lot. I mean, we had Afghanistan, followed by Iraq, followed by Libya. And let's remember, we had the Iraq War back in the 90s. I mean, I was turned 16 in 1990, so I remember the first Iraq War with George Bush Sr. And the time between the first and the second one, we were relentlessly bombing the Middle East, and it continues. I mean, people who are paying attention, and I admit that I wasn't always paying attention, but I certainly did after a while. People who have been paying attention will know that even if it's not being reported on, it's actually going on. I mean, take the Yemen, for example. There was a war happening Britain and America were supplying the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with bombs to bomb Yemen. For 6 years this went on. We had a humanitarian catastrophe there. People dying from starvation and famine and cholera. But it was hardly reported on here in the West. Very, very, they just didn't report on it. And these things actually go on. So even if you're not paying attention, it's happening. But the way that the news cycle works is it keeps us in the dark. And let's just say, for example, if a terrorist incident happens, the first thing they think about or the first thing that they report is, why have they attacked us? We're only doing good in the world. But yeah, we've been bombing them for the last 10 years non-stop. Just because you haven't reported it, it doesn't mean it's not been going on. Do you understand me?
Yeah. I completely follow what you're saying. It's kind of a hypocrisy of the whole thing that, we're squeaky clean. And why would anybody, human rights and all of that.
Absolutely.
This is also crazy to me that we have a human rights prime minister who's continuing to say, that his back, like that's shameful to anybody who does fight for human rights.
Oh, I think that kind of gives you and people listening, and I try and get this across quite often in my tweets, that it isn't our leaders who are really in control. Okay, they are just the front person. Okay, the people that really run the country are the billionaires and the millionaires in various countries. These are the people that own the huge private equity firms like BlackRock and Vanguard, for example, the weapons manufacturers. These are the people that want to create new markets for the products that they sell. So they're the ones that are giving money, donating money to various politicians and parties in the hope that they would get elected. And once they're elected, then they can ask them to push through whatever policies they're looking for. So it isn't our leaders who are going, yeah, let's bomb these people. There are people behind them saying, hold on, there's $1 billion here on the table, or all this investment here that we can get or make money from if we can get into that market there. And this is how they look at it. And they don't care about people because they don't see the people.
They certainly don't care about people. I mean, one of the biggest current issues going on in the United Kingdom right now is that, as a nation, we feel that the pensioners have been targeted. Winter fuel allowances cut in tough times, very, very tough times. And we're still sending billions to other countries. Like, again, I'm not that politically knowledgeable, hence why I've got you on to answer those questions today, Esheru. But to me, how can you be seen to be doing that, clear as day, and still try to justify that we're taking that away from the pensioners?
I just want to say before we move on, I'm not claiming that Vanguard and BlackRock are actively involved in war. Just want to cover that. Just want to say that they're the ones that steer a lot of policy because they've got a lot of money invested. Just wanted to say that before anybody says that can be done for liable. Okay. They're not involved in war. I'm just saying that they're powerful. I think, again, I never voted Labour, okay, and I didn't vote I don't vote Conservative. And the reason for that is this. Of course, there are slight differences between the parties, but if politicians really worked in the favour of the people, they would take decisions that benefit the people. Those decisions would be taxing, first of all, the large corporations that are getting away with paying minimal to no taxes, or they can move money from one location to offset losses in another. And this is all legal, of course, okay? I don't necessarily believe taxing multimillionaires it will make much change. You've got to have proper distribution of wealth. That's where the problem is. We need a distribution of wealth. That's what needs to be fixed, okay? You can tax to the high heavens, but if that money's not being redistributed properly, then there's no point taxing people. It may as well continue. So I don't believe politicians work in our favor because the donors that were backing the Tories are now backing Labour, and they're also giving money to reform, okay? So the donors are in bed with whoever's in power. Why do donors donate money? They make investments. They want a return on investment, okay? And they don't want they don't want the governments or the parties to take or make any decisions that adversely affects their business. So it is about helping to maintain the status quo, and it's that simple, nothing else. If the politicians were working in our favor, they would look to us for donations instead of large amounts of money from donors. I mean, I lived in Sweden for a very long time. You can't lobby in Sweden, that's not allowed. You can't work on behalf of another company while you're in office. And donations from large organizations, like it's not heard of. Politics can be cleaned up in this country, but we have a system that works for those that are in power at the time. Those who are outside of power or away from power can't affect the change that those in power can. So it always benefits those that are in power, and those who are in power are not going to stop the gravy train riding once they're on it.
Well, their back pockets will be quite healthy as well, I'd imagine. So yeah, why would they? But then you would maybe think, you've gone into leadership to represent a full nation. Maybe those people would mean something to you. But as I certainly feel with the UK government and the Tory leadership for so long, and now looks pretty similar so far with the way Labour have started off. But okay, that's interesting to get a bit more insight and understanding on it all. Getting back end of this podcast as we've talked quite a few subjects, but we're in 2024, Esheru. Mm-hmm. We've just had horrible riots not so long ago in the United Kingdom. We are, many institutions are being found to be institutionally racist or being investigated for it. I've been part of a case that involved institutional racism with Scottish cricket. We're 2 years on from that now. I personally guess I was a bit naive and thought, when we talk about these issues and we really highlight them and we accept that they're there, we will change and we will get better. I think the biggest part I just used there, the word is acceptance.
Mm.
That's the biggest challenge I find in that fight to have equality and no racial discrimination.
Yep.
The acceptance is not there. What's your take on where we are in 2024 in the UK with the discussion of racism, institutional racism?
Well, I think that, we haven't really moved forward. And in fact, we've gone back. I blame two people, Kemi Badenoch and a guy called Tony Sewell, that co-chair or co-authored a report that looked at institutional racism in the country or country's institutions during Boris Johnson's administration. He was in power at the time. They doctored or authored a report that said there was no evidence of institutional racism. And Kemi Badenoch has been one of the loudest on, we need to stop talking about color and we need to start seeing everybody as a monolith. And if you look at Reform and Rupert Lowe and Farage and Anderson, we need to have a meritocracy. These are the buzzwords, but they deny the existence of institutional racism, despite the fact that Black and brown people are disproportionately stopped and searched by police, disproportionately arrested, disproportionately sentenced by a judicial system that is inherently racist. Look at our politics. Yeah, we had an Indian prime minister. We've had an Indian home secretary. We've had an Indian chancellor. We've got Black and brown people in cabinet positions. But those Black and brown people have a very, very difference of opinion to you and I. If they had the same opinion as you and I, they would not be in that position. They're given their positions for two reasons. Do not rock the boat and don't ask for too much change. It's just performative.
Domestic tokenism.
It's tokenism. That's it. They're not.
Tokenism is one of in my opinion, in this space, it's one of the most dangerous things. Tokenism.
Well, what it does, it makes a lot of people. I'm not going to say all, but people who are racist. And if you look at Kemi Badenoch, for example, when she was running for the leadership, when she was challenging for the leadership the first time, she was actually backed by Britain First. And that tells you a lot. If a Black woman's being backed by a far-right party that's very racist, that tells you that that's a person that doesn't work for us. Yes, she has black skin, but she doesn't identify as a Black person. Now, I'm not saying that the rest of them don't identify with their color, but they work as upholders of white supremacy. They're very much gatekeepers. And this is why, if you look at the media, even if the media sphere, everybody, all the Black and brown faces, most of the Black and brown faces in the media sphere are also very similar. Of course, not all of them. I don't want to tar all of them with the same brush, but a lot of them get their posts, but they don't rock the boat because they where they are, they're earning good money, they have a position, but they don't talk a lot about Black issues or issues in society for Asians because they don't want to rock the boat. And even Parliament, I mean, look at America. You have a Black caucus in the US, right? And what the Black caucus does, it works together cross-party to push for change for African-American community across the US. Here in Britain, we have two-tier policing for Black people it's been going on since the 1960s. It isn't anything new, okay? I mean, I'll give you two great examples. Rashan Charles, 2017, he was choked to death by a police officer just down the road in Dalston from where I live. The police officer was found to have not done any wrongdoing. Stephen Lawrence, 1993, a great example. Instead of the killers being investigated, they investigated his family. That's a great example of two-tier policing, not the rubbish that Tommy Robinson talks about and his minions over the last year. Where are the Black...
We've also got up in Scotland, the Sheikh Bayou.
Exactly, right. So where are the Black MPs coming together, cross-party, and pushing for a discussion in Parliament about these over-policing tactics? People say, oh, you want a Black party? No, we don't want a Black party, but Reform with Nigel Farage, they're far-right, and they're working for far-right racists. They're not working in my benefit or yours. Kate Hoey stood up in the House of Lords, a couple of months back, and she says that she didn't think it was fair that the racist rioters, were being given the title far right. Now, how do you think that would, if David Lammy stood up and said something about black people like that, how do you think that would come across? The newspapers would be up in arms about it. Oh, they want to be separate and they're racist. But we can have a far right party in office, a far right party in Parliament, and let's look at the Conservatives. I mean, right now, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badr, they're further right than Suella Braverman, and they're not working in our benefit. But that's okay. That's normal. But to say we want to have a group of black people and brown people in Parliament working for our interests is unfathomable. And this is why the black and brown politicians don't do anything about it, because they can't. Because it's about maintaining the status quo, not rocking the boat, and continuing to ride the gravy train. And I hold them accountable. I hope they're listening. All of them.
You and me both. Having watched on for the last 2 years, and the case that I've been involved in particular, yeah. I hope those people are watching, because
Absolutely.
those people are part of the problem, and they are riding the train of other people fighting for this, and they get themselves into that position. And like you say, the salary, keep your mouth closed, and to the point now where, our media, they don't even call a genocide for what it is. They literally will rather don't rock the boat. And don't call it for what it is. And when it comes to the point that children are dying and you choose to not rock the boat, sorry, it's better to rock the boat, I think, and speak truth. We've talked about a lot of things today. Let's try and finish on some sort of positive. How does the future look from an all-inclusive point of view in the United Kingdom, and how do you hope one day we could look at places like the Middle East and see a future? How do you see that panning out?
Bob Marley has, I can't remember the name of the song, but I'm going to paraphrase what he says. Until the idea that one race is superior over all other races, until the idea is, gone, taken care of, but blown out the water, we're going to still have equality in society. We need true equality, not performative, not a few black and brown faces here and there and a white person saying, yeah, we have equality, or a panel of whites discussing racism on a TV show. We need to get away from
or a white panel that decides on an outcome of whether something is racist or not.
Exactly, which is what we've witnessed since George Floyd, right? This is what we've witnessed. We need to get away from the idea that one race is superior over all others. This world was built, by a collection of ideas from people in different regions of the world, parts of Africa, parts of the Middle East, parts of Europe, parts of the US. This is how this world was developed. It wasn't developed by a white man or seven white men. So we need to get away from this idea that one race is superior. And once we can get away from that and we start looking at everybody equally, and that doesn't mean that we stop talking about the problems, because we have to have very uncomfortable conversations until they become comfortable, right? Telling me to shut up and stop talking about racism doesn't make it go away, which is what a lot of people like to say on Twitter, right? If a child's being abused, and you wouldn't tell a child to shut up and it will go away. If a woman's getting abused, you wouldn't. So don't tell me to shut up. Let's talk. And let's get to the uncomfortable conversations. Let the conversations become comfortable, and then we can find a way to move forward.
I agree with you. I agree, but that's the part. People are not prepared to have enough. They feel like you have one conversation, that's enough, squash it now, let's move on. It's such an uncomfortable subject. We need to get comfortable just being comfortable talking about it. These issues exist. But I mean, there is a fragility there of these subjects being talked about.
Absolutely.
And until we get past that, it's very difficult.
I'm just going to say this in closing. What really gives me hope, I mean, I'm a father of my son, he's 23, and most of us who have children that are growing up in this time can attest to this, whether our children are mixed or not. When I look at them, that generation, they give me hope, because they can't fathom a world where we can look back and we remember homophobia, and we will remember the rocks being thrown at people because of their skin color. We remember the racism in a way that they can't understand. I remember having a discussion with my son when he was the age of 11 about racism because somebody said something about me to him. And his face, he just couldn't believe what he was hearing. And that was that. I think that was, for me, it was a wake-up call that generation, they are the most inclusive. And they give me hope when I look at the way that they are.
I, I echo that 100%. The youth are the future, and they
Yes.
are. They're very strong. I mean, you look at Bangladesh.
Yep.
So I don't want to go into open another can of worms and go and talk, but that was the youth that has fought for their country, and I think we've got some great voices in Britain when it comes to youth, and long may it continue. They're the future, and I'd like to see some of them come into leadership and power, and then we might start seeing some changes when it comes to politics in the United Kingdom.
And that's the other thing. Politics needs, you touch on a very important point. What we need in politics, we need people that are more representative, not career politicians that have gone to private schools and to the best universities and channel through the best jobs into power. We need people that, we need the ex-council of state person, or we need the ex-nurse, or, we need people that are more representative of the people on civvy streets for politics to change, because only then will they be able to fight for, what is right for us. A millionaire doesn't know struggle in the same way. Sorry, person born into money doesn't know struggle in the same way that you and I will know struggle. So we need better representation in politics.
Esheru, been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Really thoroughly enjoyed listening to you, your knowledge on all these different subjects. We're connected now. I look forward to, maybe doing something else again in future. And I just would like to say thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.